Is it away?
Yeah.
Let me move it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, wait 1 second. She's
Okay.
getting-
Okay, you can start.
Okay, so the pericardial sac, do you remember from AP1 the parietal pericardium, that membrane that surrounds the heart? It's not on this model. I would ask it as a question. So it would just be a big membrane that surrounds this heart. For the heart wall layers, the epicardium, again, not on this model, but it's just deep to the pericardial sac, is the epicardium. So it would be a thin membrane that is right on the surface of the heart, and then the pericardial sac would be just outside of that. Myocardium is referring to wherever there's muscle. So all this red stuff, that's the myocardium. And then the endocardium, again, would have to be asked as a question. It's a thin membrane that lines the inside of the chambers of the heart. When you look at the heart just as a shape, it's got the pointy part at the bottom, that's the apex, and then the base is the top. It's just got all these blood vessels covering it, but it would be the very top if you cut off all the blood vessels. The atria are the chambers at the top, so the two smaller chambers. If you open it up, you can see inside that they're chambers. And the atrial appendages, the atrial appendages are, see how they got sort of pointy on the medial part of the atria? Those are the atrial appendages.
Like the little brainy part?
Yeah, it's like in a real heart, it's more of a flap. You can actually kind of grab it, and it's a flappy part. So, not that I do that a lot. Anyway, okay, so these are the atrial appendages. The ventricles are the bottom chambers. They're bigger. You can open them up and see the big chambers inside. These are the ventricles. Right heart, left heart, that just means this is the right side, this is the left side. Blood comes in to the right atrium, goes down into the left or the right ventricle, then it goes out to the lungs, picks up oxygen, dumps off carbon dioxide, comes back into the left side, and then out to the body, which we'll talk about in lecture, but just general overview. The interatrial septum is the wall that separates the two atria from each other. So if you just kind of grab in here, you can feel a septum. It's just a big wall between the two atria. The interventricular septum you can see a lot easier. It's this wall right here between the two ventricles. The tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve are the valves between the atria and the ventricles. The tricuspid is on the right, and the bicuspid is on the left. The aortic semilunar valve, if you look at this tube right here, this is the aorta. So if you just follow the aorta as it comes out of the left ventricle, there's a valve between the two. So you go right here. See how this is leading up into the aorta? It's right here. This is an aortic semilunar valve. It's number 104, 105, and 106 are written on there. The pulmonary semilunar valve, this is called the pulmonary trunk. It's leading to the lungs from the right ventricle, and there's a valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary trunk. That's the pulmonary semilunar valve, and it's number 101, 102, and 103. Chordae tendineae are just what they sound like. They're tendinous cords, basically, and they're coming off of the tricuspid and bicuspid valve. So they're these little strings coming off of the valves. They attach to what are called papillary muscles, and those are these sort of finger-like extensions of muscle sticking out, like number 77, 76, 69. These are all papillary muscles. Trabeculae carnae, the word in Latin literally means meat struts. Like remember the trabeculae and spongy bone, how it was like that webby network? It's just a webby network of muscles. So see how it's all webby right there? That's the trabeculae carnae. The pectinate muscles are in the atria. See these? How there's these little tiny muscles up here, sort of extensions, almost like little tiny papillary muscles, but not quite, not the same function. Those are the pectinate muscles, only in the atria. Fossa ovalis is way deep in the interatrial septum, and there's a number 81. I don't think you're going to be able to get it on your videos, but it's a perfectly flat circle. You can feel it as this big flat circle, and there's a number 81 on the fossa ovalis. Okay. Now for the conduction system, we use this heart And if you take it apart, see all the yellow stuff? That's referring to the conduction system. So if you remember in AP1, I don't know what other classes talked about, but we kind of briefly went over how the cells spontaneously depolarize and then it spreads from one cell to the next, and that's how the heart ends up contracting. This is just showing the pathway of how that depolarization spreads. So it starts up here, the pacemakers up here in the SA node. And see how there's like a little yellow dot up there? That's the SA node. It leads to the AV node, which is at the floor of the right atrium. And there's another little yellow dot right there. So that's the AV node. The AV bundle is this, leading out of the AV node, right there, this horizontal yellow line. And it leads to these, which are the left and right bundle branches. And they go down through the interventricular septum. And they lead out all over the surface of the ventricles through these little tiny fibers, which are called Purkinje fibers. Okay. Now, the ligamentum arteriosum, I actually like best on this model because it's got a different color to it. It's this little blue thing right here. This would be the aorta. This is a pulmonary trunk. So see how this is? It's the same thing. Pulmonary trunk, aorta, aorta. This little connection here, it's a little fibrous connection of connective tissue. That's the ligamentum arteriosum. When you're a fetus, which we'll do when we do fetal circulation, this ligamentum arteriosum is actually a duct, and the fossa ovalis is actually a foramen, so it's a hole. So have you ever heard people say that their baby had a hole in the heart when they were born and they have to close it? They're supposed to close when they're born, but when you're a fetus, you actually have these little connections between those tubes. And that's it.